Hi, I'm really welcome back to my booktube channel, Life Worth Reading. Today I'm going to be telling you about 10 books that I really enjoyed when I read them, but I feel like I haven't talked about them enough on this channel. I tried picking books that I feel are a bit underrated and that not a lot of people are constantly talking about, and books that aren't like super popular because you've heard about them already. And I think that more people should read. And maybe you don't know that I've read and enjoyed these books because, you know, I've started my channel 2.5 years ago. So some of the books I've read a little while back and I haven't talked about them since. So I thought that I would do this little recap video and tell you about 10 books that I really love and I think that you should read. The first one that I want to tell you about is Read It to Bone by Jacqueline Woodson. This is a book that I had been waiting to read for a couple of years now. I've heard about this book and I had been waiting to purchase a physical copy of it. And when I finally got it, I read it last summer and I really enjoyed this book. It was a 5-star for me. The writing is wonderful and it's this intergenerational story set in New York. I mean, in the present day it's set in New York, but a couple of years back it's set in other places as well. And it's just about this family and about their relationship with one another and how their childhood and adulthood shaped them to be the parents or grandparents or children that they are today to this family. And it is just a beautiful read. I want to reread it actually, and I want to annotate it. I never annotate the first time around because in my head I always annotate all the books that I don't like, and so when I start to read a book for the first time I never annotate anything because I'm scared that I'll end up not enjoying the book and then I'll have to sell it or donate or whatever it is. So I do want to reread this book and annotate it because there are some beautiful passages in here and I just really enjoyed the story. Sometimes it is a little bit heavy because it follows, for example, the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre and post 9/11 New York. So it's about race, class, parenthood. It has a lot of different themes in it and sometimes it can be a little bit rough, but I definitely do enjoy character-driven stories and I enjoy intergenerational stories like this that explore this sort of family themes. And so this was a perfect read for that and I highly recommend it. Next up, I want to talk about a YA book actually, and that is The Weight of Our Sky by Hannah Halkoff. This is a book that I read maybe 2 years ago and I wasn't expecting to enjoy it this much. It follows the I'm not sure if it's a civil war in Malaysia, but it's during the 60s, I believe, in Malaysia, and there's a lot of riots going on and a lot of uncertainty, a lot of death, a lot of violence, and it follows our main character whose name I don't remember, but she unfortunately suffers with OCD during a time where it's not very common for you to be diagnosed with such mental health disturbances. And so she feels very alone in her struggle, and she envisions this OCD as kind of like a jinn or a demon that follows her around, and it is just so heartbreaking to read. And it follows her as she is separated from her mother and she is trying for the whole book to find her mother in a city that's like ravished with violence and with so much havoc, right? And so it is quite heartbreaking. I think that it's like in the middle between a middle grade and a YA. So it's younger YA or older middle grade. And I just really enjoyed this story. It like broke my heart. I'm not a usual crier. I didn't exactly cry, but it was just so heartbreaking to not only see OCD represented in such a young girl, but to see that she didn't have any help with this at the time, and just her trying to find her mother through this ravished city was just really heartbreaking. And I do want to read other books by this author. I know she has The Queen of Tiles and The Girl and the Ghost. I definitely want to read them because I really enjoyed the writing in this one. And I feel like Hannah Halkoff has just a way with words and a way to make us care for the character that I don't usually find in a lot of YA or middle grade books. Also because I don't read a lot of them, so that could be on me. But I definitely enjoyed this book. I feel like it is a little bit of an older title and I feel like it doesn't get a lot of attention. But if you like this kind of sad stories with great mental health representation, then I definitely think that you should read this book because it is amazing, but it's also heartbreaking. Speaking of disability representation, I want to talk about Elena Knows by Claudia Pinheiro. This was my favorite book of last year, so if you've seen my best books of the year, then you know about this book already, but I feel like I don't give it enough love, honestly. I think that this book is absolutely incredible. The writing style is so experimental, and it really reflects what our main character is going through, what Elena is going through, because she is suffering with this rare and advanced form of Parkinson, and so she has a lot of struggles moving around, just doing normal tasks, and she lives her days and her hours pill by pill. And so the writing style, in a way that I can't really explain without you reading it, really reflects that struggle and that slowness and that difficulty to move around. And also, her daughter Rita has just committed suicide. She was found hanged in the church bell tower, and Elena does not believe that this was a suicide, but no one else believes her. And she is just on this path to try and figure out what happened to her daughter, and she was her primary caretaker, so now she's all alone, and it's just really heartbreaking, and it's really difficult to read because they had not the best relationship. Sometimes it was a little bit dysfunctional, but you can really tell the love that they had for each other, and it's just a really heartbreaking story. But if you are expecting like a mystery or to have everything answered, this is not really the book for you. It's more of a character-driven story about Elena trying to find out what happened to her daughter and trying to work through her disability that is really holding her back and not allowing her to live a full life. And it's really sad, but I think that it's absolutely unbelievable, and it's such a fresh take on a writing style that I haven't seen before, and I really enjoyed it, and I do want to reread it soon. I want to read all of these books actually, but these two that I've talked about are definitely the priority, so I want to read them soon to see if it still holds up, but I feel like they will. Also, a character-driven story that I've read semi-recently, so you might have heard me talk about this, is Love After Love by Ingrid Prasad. This book is set in the Caribbean, and it follows Betty, that's it, her son Solo, and Mr. Chetan. So it's about Betty, and she was married to this really abusive man, and they had a child together named Solo, and when Solo is 4 or 5 years old, his abusive father dies, and so he is raised alone with his mother. He has an amazing connection and relationship to his mother, and his mother actually moves in with Mr. Chetan, and they are not a couple. They are just friends that have moved in together because Mr. Chetan needed a house, and so they become this sort of like family. They are a family, and so they grow up together, and then Solo, when he turns 18, he finds out something that he finds very disturbing, and that kind of ruins his relationship with his family, and he moves to New York to live with his father's side of the family. And so they don't speak, him and his mom don't speak for a couple of years there, and it is just a character-driven story about each of these characters. It can be very heartbreaking and very frustrating because you are rooting for certain things to happen, and you are rooting for certain characters to realize certain things, and it's just very hard to read a book. It can be a little bit frustrating at times, but it is a beautiful story, and I think it is written in this Caribbean flow of writing. I feel like this would translate really well on the audiobook, but even in writing, it has that Caribbean voice in it, and the rhythm of the words, and the writing style is so incredible to read, and it's such a calming experience to read this book, and you just get really into it, and it's like this whole world in writing that I find really spectacular, and I just really enjoyed this book, and I think that more people should read it because it has certain themes and that I feel like people should read about. And it's just a really, really incredible story, and I'm so thankful to own this book. I really, really loved it. Next up, I want to talk about a book that I didn't necessarily love a lot, but I think that it's a really interesting book, And even though it was a Nobel Prize, I feel like not enough people have read it, and it's such an interesting and specific type of book. And that is Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. And this book is about a Polish older woman, and she lives in a very isolated and cold village. And one of her neighbors is found murdered. And then certain people are found murdered, and it is just this mystery of who killed them. But it also has a lot to do with the fact that a lot of animal abuse occurs. Not abuse in torture specifically, no, but like hunting wise, a lot of it happens. And so you are on this mystery trying to figure out who is killing all of these people. And so if you like mysteries, this is a good one to read. And I feel like it's just a very interesting narrative because you are in this older woman's head and you can see how nobody takes her seriously and you are just stuck inside her head. So she makes a very great main character because you just feel for her and you are rooting for her because no one around her takes her seriously, because they think it's just a crazy old woman trying to solve a crime. And I definitely enjoyed this book. I found it to be a very distinct type of story. I found it to be a very cold setting, like I could feel the cold in my bones, and I just really liked the main character. I liked being in someone else's head that we don't usually get to see an old woman in front of a mystery, except for like in specific mystery books like Agatha Christie books and stuff like that. But in a modern day book and mystery, you don't often see an older woman as the lead, and I think that it was a very interesting and fresh take on a contemporary story and a mystery. And I really like this book, and I think that even though it is a Nobel Prize, so it's not really underrated, but I feel like not enough people have read it. So if this at all sounds interesting to you, I think that you should give it a try. It may be a bit polarizing because her writing is definitely a little bit strange sometimes, but I feel like you should give it a try to see whether you vibe with it or not. I definitely do want to read other books by this author because I don't know, I like her ideas and I like her weird writing style sometimes. Then I want to mention The Tea-Girl of Hummingbird Lane by Lisa C. This is one of the first books that I read when I first got back into reading in 2018 or 2019 now. And it was when I first got SCRIBD, and it was actually the first book that I read on SCRIBD, which was, I don't know, I just remember it very vividly. I actually don't quite know how to explain this plot to you. I remember very vividly to read it, but I'm going to read you the synopsis so it goes better because it's been a long time since I've read this book. So, in the remote mountain village, Leanne and her family align their lives around the seasons and farming of tea. For the Aka people, ensconced in ritual and routine, life goes on as it has for generations, until a stranger appears at the village gate in a jeep, the first automobile any of the villagers have ever seen. Slowly, Leanne, one of the few educated girls on her mountain, begins to reject the customs that shaped her early in life. When she has a baby out of wedlock, she rejects a tradition that would compel her to give the child over to be killed, and instead leaves her wrapped in a blanket with a tea cake tucked in its folds near an orphanage in the nearby city. As Leanne comes into herself, leaving her village for an education, a business, and a city life, her daughter Haley is raised in California by loving adoptive parents. Despite her privileged childhood, Haley wonders about her origins. Across the ocean, Leanne longs for her lost daughter. Over the course of the year, each search for the meaning in the study of pu-erh, the tea that has shaped their family's destiny for centuries. So this book is about the farming of tea, and it is something that is very culturally important in Chinese culture. And I really enjoyed the story. Reading about the Aka people was so interesting. Like the first couple of chapters build the lore and all the customs and traditions of the Aka people. I really found it to be such an interesting story that I had never read before. And I found it to be just a beautiful story about a mother and a child that are so far away from each other but are longing for each other without knowing. And it, towards the middle, I remember that it had a little bit too much about the tea and the business of tea. I'm not going to lie, it got a little bit, I'm not going to say boring, but a little bit tougher to read during the middle. But I just really loved the message, and the first like part of it with like the whole discovering the culture in Leanne growing up in this remote village farming tea was just incredible. And I do want to read other books by Lisa C. I know that she is a very talented and prolific author that has written a lot of books, but this one in specific just really marked my journey as a reader, because it was when I got back into reading, and I found it to be just a very beautiful story that I still remember very vividly reading, and it just really marked me. And I think that if you have any interest in kind of historical fiction, I think that you should read this book because it is well worth it. Then we have The Mothers by Brit Bennett. Now, everyone knows that Brit Bennett is a menace when it comes to writing, right? But I feel like people talk more about The Vanishing Half than they talk about The Mothers, and I feel like I need to give The Mothers its flowers because it is a beautiful character-driven story. It is not as, even though The Vanishing Half is also very character-driven, it has a little bit more plot than this does. This is just very like following certain characters throughout their lives. And this is about Nadia, and Nadia is 17 years old and she is mourning her mother's suicide, which was really hard on her. And she gets involved with the pastor's son, Luke, and they have a child together that they need to hide, and it becomes like this whole thing. And then later on, her friend Aubrey, who is her best friend, yeah, she has hidden this from her whole life. And then when they become adults, like the three of them have like this whole cross relationships, and it gets like, it is very drama heavy. There's a lot that happens between these three characters as adults, and they're trying to escape this decisions that they made like 10 years back or 15 years back or whatever it was. And I just really enjoyed following this story. I really cared for the characters. I love character-driven stories because it's when we get to root the most for the characters, I believe. And I really, really rooted for them. This has so many secrets and betrayals and friendship, and it's just a really great story. Like, I remember that I read this in one day, and it's almost 300 pages. And I remember that I read this in just like one day because I was so engrossed in the story that I just had to read it and keep on reading it to see what happened and to find out how it would end. And I just think that it's, in terms of being a Brit Bennett title, I think it's a little bit underrated, and I think that you should give it a try if you love character-driven stories and a little spice and a little drama. If you like that, then you'll definitely love this one because this is so messy. Next up, I want to talk about a book that is a little different and that I read last summer as well, and that is called Optic Nerve by Maria Ginza. This is an Argentinian author, and it's like this very experimental type of book that is a mix between biographies of painters and kind of like vignettes of this character's life that you don't really get to know. You don't know who this character is. You just know them telling vignettes about certain moments in their lives intertwined with stories about painters and about art, mostly about painters and artists from South America, which I don't know a lot about, which was great to know. Like, every time a painter was mentioned, I would go search him up, see the paintings, and it just gave me a lot of knowledge that I didn't have, which I'm always thankful for in a book. And I think it was just a very experimental type of book that I really enjoyed reading, and that I wasn't expecting to like this much. And it is a short book. It can read very fast because it's like all these vignettes, but I just found it to be very interesting, and I still remember it quite vividly. It is something that has stuck with me, and I just really enjoyed learning about this character who we don't really know who they are, their identity, and at the same time learning all about these real life facts of this artist that have been, maybe some of them have been forgotten in history. And I really appreciate Maria Ginza's efforts to bring them back to life with her book. And I know that she has a new book out that is called A Portrait of a Woman or something. I'll put it here as well, and I really want to read that one because I liked the writing in Optic Nerve, and I found it to be a very interesting book, and I feel like I gained a lot from reading it. And it's just like, it was a perfect summer book about reading it at the beach and just finding out about all these different artists and how their stories intertwined with this character that we never really get to know. The next book that I want to talk about is The Stationery Shop by Miriam Kamali. This is a historical fiction that is mixed with a little bit of a romance. So if you enjoy either of these genres, then I think that you would really like this one. And it is set in the 50s in Iran during a political upheaval and a sort of revolution that is going on. And it's about our two main characters that fall in love in a stationery shop, and they try to get married, but during the day, the other does not show up. And so they are torn away by this political upheaval and this revolution. And our main character, Roya, she ends up going to the US to study. And so they are separated for their entire lives, just wondering what happened to the other person and why they did not show up on the day. And it goes back between that past and their present day as they are much older. And it is just a very interesting read. If you don't know a lot about Iran, or as I didn't, I think that this is a great entry point to learning more about the history and the culture and the political aspects of Iran. And I really, really enjoyed the story. I really enjoyed the writing. I thought that the story itself, the love story, was really cute. I found myself rooting for them, which doesn't happen a lot to me. I'm a little bit cold sometimes when it comes to romances. But I will say that the ending, not exactly for me. It got a little bit mushy. Oh my god. I'm sorry, my Tamagotchi just... oh my god, that scared me. Okay. Anyway, the ending got a little bit mushy. It's not really for me, but I feel like if you like romances, then you might really like it. And it was just a good time. It was a beautiful story, and I'm very thankful that I read it. Alrighty, and the last book that I want to talk about is actually a short story collection, and that is The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Filwa. And this is one of my favorite short story collections of all time. I listened to the audiobook of this, and I think about re-listening to it all the time. It was just so amazing. All the stories, they just did stuff to me, okay? Disha Filwa has an amazing writing style. The stories are so diverse in nature. There are about church ladies, as we saw, but I feel like they have such different messages throughout, and I just had such a good time listening to these stories. I loved How to Make Love to an Astrophysicist. Peach Cobbler was incredible, and I feel like if you like short story collections, you definitely need to give this one a try, especially the audiobook. It was just incredible. I love it to this day. I remember almost every single story that was in it, which is very rare for a short story collection. And I just feel like it's so amazing. Like, it is such a good time. It is such a great and strong collection of short stories that you absolutely need to read this one. Alright, so those are 10 books that I read and that I don't talk about enough on my channel. I think that you all should give these books a try. If any of them sound interesting to you, then you definitely should try it out. I only own these 3 so far. We'll see which ones I own in the near future, but I just love these books with all my heart, and I feel like if you haven't read any of them, you definitely should. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more bookish content, and I'll see you in my next video. I hope you have a nice day, and always remember that life is worth reading.